Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi man wala. First of all, I want to wish you all a very late Ramadan Mubarak and hope that all of us, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, will be able to witness the blessings of Laylatul Qadr. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to go strong in these last 10 nights that are coming up. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to witness the fullness of Laylatul Qadr and to be forgiven through it and to have a lifetime of good deeds earned through it and ultimately to be honored and embraced by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allahumma ameen. 2 years ago today, Muhammad Ali, rahimahullah ta'ala, passed away. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have mercy upon him and to accept the good that he did and forgive his shortcomings. Muhammad Ali was a man that set the tone in many different ways. And if you think about what really made him special, one of the things that made him so special, if not the main thing that made him so special, was the confidence that he had. The confidence in his faith, the way that he insisted, for example, that the one star, the Hollywood Walk of Fame, that would not be on the ground, would be placed up, not because of some personal ego, but because he felt like it would be inappropriate if people would step on the name Muhammad. And so he insisted, and they ended up putting that. And so if you go to that Walk of Fame, you'll see that the only star that's not on the ground is the star of Muhammad Ali. The way that he took pride in his faith. The one that gave him da'wah was Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, Malcolm X. And Malcolm's greatest contribution to the civil rights movement at the time was that he understood that the greatest danger of racism was not how other people felt about black people, but if that climate persisted for long enough, black people would feel about themselves what was being said about them. They would internalize that racism and internalize that bigotry. And so one of the most famous lines of Malcolm X was, "Who taught you to hate yourself? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin? And who taught you to hate the texture of your hair?" And so on and so forth. I want to contend that in this climate of Islamophobia, the most dangerous element of Islamophobia is not what other people say about Islam and what other people say about Muslims. It's when young Muslims start to internalize the things that are being said about Islam in the wider public, in the greater public. And we look around right now and we see that the masjid is full, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, but the latest statistics on the Muslim community show that 23% of American-born Muslims no longer identify as Muslim. That's 1/4 of the community that we've lost. And if you listen to young Muslims speak, many times what you're going to hear are the exact same things that are being said by Islamophobes, but they're repackaged in a way that shows that that doubt and that crisis now persists in the hearts of our own young Muslims. And we're losing them because we're not speaking to them and giving them the tools that they need. And so, Yaqeen Institute for Islamic Research is a non-profit charity, zakat-eligible, tax-eligible research institute. What we do is we produce papers, academic papers by scholars and academics that address the most difficult issues about faith, with a focus first and foremost on young Muslims that are facing that crisis, that are looking for some sort of certainty and some sort of confidence. And we focus on 3 areas. On dismantling doubts, so basically talking about what Islam isn't, and the second one is nurturing conviction, talking about what Islam is so that people understand the truth of this religion, and the third one is inspiring contribution, what Islam does, basically showing that Islam is exceptional, Islam is not just acceptable. Islam has something to offer to this world, and it has offered something to this world throughout history. So we take our researchers and we research, alhamdulillah, these 3 topic areas, and then we take these academic papers that can then be broken down into various forms of digestible content, infographics, audiobooks, podcasts, executive summaries, short videos, curriculum that we're making for MSAs across the country, young Muslims, Islamic schools and weekend schools that people can then take for free. We don't monetize any of our content because the hatred against our community is not monetized. We don't monetize anything that we do. For free, be a resource for all of these different layers so that we can reach further than where that hatred has reached and where those inaccurate claims about our religion have reached. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. this portion of the Quran in Surah Al-Furqan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes through many different characteristics and many different traits. But I think that that last discussion that comes within Surah Al-Furqan, which refers to ibadur-Rahman, the servants of the most merciful, is obviously one of the most discussed portions of tafsir that we find in our books, because there are some very clear traits that are given. And the very first way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the servants of the most merciful, وَعِبَادُ-الرَّحْمَنِ الَّذِينَ يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ هَوْنًا وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. They're people that tread the earth lightly, and when they are addressed by the ignorant, then they simply respond with salam, they respond with peace. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions وَالَّذِينَ يَبِيتُونَ لِرَبِّهِمْ سُجَّدًا وَقِيَامًا, and they are the people that would spend time in prostration and in standing up alone with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their qiyamul layl, in their night prayer. Now I want to connect this actually to a very well-known hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, as a janazah was passing by, he said, "Imma mustarihin," he said, either this person is relieved, or mustarahan min, or this person is relieved from. What does he mean by that? Either people are relieved from this person, or this person is relieved from people. What that means is that either this person gave to the world in a way, and the people around them in a way, that when they die, that person is relieved from the people because they can move on now and they can reap the rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or that person brought harm and hardship to their environment and to the people around them, so as they depart from this world, then people are relieved from them. People are happy to see them go, even if they won't verbalize it that way. What does this connect, or how does this connect to these particular ayat? We said you're either relieved or you're relieved from, right? I want you to remember this equation, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always connects the two together. Allah always connects generosity with spiritual practice, with qiyam, for example. Allah always connects the two. I want you to remember this all the time. Either you are distracted from the people by Allah, or you are distracted from Allah by the people. Did anyone remember? Did you guys get that? You're either distracted by the people from Allah, or you're distracted by Allah from the people. What does that mean? There is no way that you can deal with people that are aggressive with you, and people that assault your ego or bruise your ego, or people that show you a certain level of mannerisms that should be responded to with an equal amount of harshness. There's no way that you're able to survive that unless you know two things. Number one, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tolerates you, even though there are times that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could punish you right away for your bad mannerisms with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for your heedlessness and for your turning away from Him. So the mercy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows to you. Number two, that this world is really not worth getting mad over. There are two things. The first one is, how does Allah deal with me when I slip? So if I want that mercy, ibadur-Rahman, after all, the servants of the most merciful, then I want to show that same amount of mercy to someone who slips unjustly with me. But the second one is that this world is really not worth it. If you think about those people that are like angelic people, that subhanAllah, when they pass away, you know, the way that people are described, they never hurt anybody, right? It was such a gentle, saintly, angelic type of person, and that person never hurt anybody. And the imagery that you get is الَّذِينَ يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ هَوْنًا. They used to tread the earth very lightly. They didn't have a difficult, heavy presence. They had a meaningful presence, but not a heavy presence. A heavy presence is one that bothers people. They had a meaningful presence, but they were very light. They did not cause hardship to people. You know, when someone who has that type of presence, when they walk in the room, they bring a certain type of doom and gloom, like, oh God, here we go again. Like, we have to walk on eggshells around this person. We don't want to mess with this person. This person's easily offended. You know, what are we going to end up talking about? You know, the person has a heavy presence, and it's not necessarily a meaningful presence. There's another person that brings meaning to the room, but not a heavy or burdensome presence. Like, think about the Prophet ﷺ. There is no man who cared less about dunya, right? About the world and its material things. But the Sahaba felt light around him to where they could joke, to where they could, the hadith of Zayd ibn Thabit radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, كنا مع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فإذا ذكرنا الدنيا ذكره معنا وإذا ذكرنا الآخرة ذكرها معنا وإذا ذكرنا الطعام ذكره معنا. We were with the Prophet ﷺ. He would come sit with the young people. If we talked about food, the Prophet ﷺ would join in with a few points about how to eat. If we talked about dunya, the Prophet ﷺ talked about dunya too. And if we talked about the hereafter, that's obviously where the interest of the Prophet ﷺ was. And the Prophet ﷺ talked about the hereafter. So he didn't have a burdensome presence. It was a meaningful, there is no presence more meaningful than that, but it wasn't a heavy presence. Right? يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ هَوْنًا. And then when a person has those characteristics and those qualities, sometimes people forget themselves around those people. And it would happen with the Prophet ﷺ too, right? That people would forget, he made you so comfortable around him that you slipped, right? Because his presence was light. And that person does not get overly offended, does not take it so seriously, does not become arrogant or abusive or abrasive in that process. In fact, sometimes someone else has to alert another person that you may have slipped with that person because they didn't react with a loud voice, or they didn't react with foolishness the way that would be expected of a person in that situation. Why? Because they are in this world, but they are not of this world. They are in this world, but they are not of this world. They're connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Their hearts are connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even when they're surrounded by people. Whereas there are others that even in the most important times where you should be immersed in connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're thinking about other people and you're all over the place. You're scattered, right? The more you can focus on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the easier it is to deal with people around you. And the less burdensome you become to the people around you. The more you focus on people, I'm not talking about in the capacity of service and generosity. That's part of your focus on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because you're dealing with people through the lens of your dealings with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the more that you focus on people, the more distracted you get from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The more you worry about how people talk about you, the less concerned you are with how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees your deeds. The more you worry about how people talk to you, the less concerned you are about the conversation that you will have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Day of Judgment. The more you worry about their perception, the less you worry about His. So distract yourself with Allah from the people, not in a way that makes you ignorant or unaware of their hardships, but in a way that would make you serve them with no expectations from them whatsoever. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from ibadur-Rahman, from His true servants, the servants of the most merciful. Allahumma ameen. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.